Most shonen authors treat death like a plot device, a benchmark to make the main character angry, unlock a power-up, or raise the stakes of a fight. But Tatsuki Fujimoto doesn't write like that. For Fujimoto, death isn't the end of a character's story, it's the exact moment his story actually begins. If you look at everything he's written over the last few years, a pattern emerges that I don't think people have fully mapped out yet. Chainsaw Man Part 1, Look Back, and Goodbyeeri aren't just separate stories. They form what I'm calling the Grief Trilogy. 3 completely different genres, 3 completely different tones, one obsessively relentless examination of how human beings process the impossible weight of losing someone they love. Today we're breaking down all 3. We're going to figure out why Fujimoto keeps returning to death, how each story maps onto a different stage of grief, and why his conclusions hit harder than almost anything else being written in manga right now. Let's get into it. Let's start with Chainsaw Man Part 1. On the surface, it's a chaotic blood-soaked action manga, but underneath the gore is a textbook study on the shocking denial stages of grief. Think about how Fujimoto builds the Hayakawa family dynamic. He forces Denji, Aki, and Power into a domestic routine before he destroys it. We watch them brush their teeth, split grocery bills, bicker over dinner. Fujimoto spends chapters making you comfortable with these people living together before he takes everything away. Because that's the point. The true tragedy of death isn't just the moment our heart stops beating. It's the sudden violent erasure of a shared routine. It's the realization that the ordinary moments you took for granted were actually the whole thing. When Aki dies, Fujimoto pulls off one of the most psychologically devastating moves in manga history. He maps Aki's deteriorating mind onto a childhood game. Aki doesn't understand he's destroying his family. He thinks he's just playing in the snow, and Denji has to kill someone who looks like his father figure while that person is completely unaware of what's happening. And then look at Denji afterward. He doesn't go on a vengeful shonen rampage. He collapses. He sits on a couch, can't open doors, starves himself, begs Makima to make all of his choices for him. This is the non-paralyzed reality of sudden trauma. Fujimoto is telling us that when loss is that sudden and that violent, it breaks your autonomy. You don't become a hero, you become a shell. Chainsaw Man Part 1 represents grief as an invasive predator that rips away your foundation without warning and leaves you unable to function in its absence. But what happens when the shock wears off and reality settles in? You enter the most dangerous territory of grief, bargaining and guilt. That's where Look Back lives. Look Back is Fujimoto's most personal work. It loosely mirrors his own life in the real-world tragedy of the 2019 Kyoto animation arson attack. Here, the death isn't caused by a fictional devil, it's caused by senseless mass violence. Komodo is murdered at her art school, and Fujuno is left completely shattered. But notice where Fujimoto directs Fujuno's grief. It turns entirely inward. She stands outside Komodo's door and dismantles every choice she ever made. If I hadn't encouraged her to come out of her room, if I hadn't told her to pursue art, if I hadn't done any of this, she blames her own love for the outcome. This is the agonizing loop of the survivor's guilt. The belief that your connection to someone made you conflict in their death. And to cope with this, Fujimoto does something brilliant with the medium itself. He uses the manga panel format to rewrite reality. We enter a what-if timeline where Fujuno saves Komodo. For a brief moment, the story tricks you into believing you can bargain with death. You think maybe there's a version of this where they both survive. But the door slams back, reality crashes down, the alternate timeline vanishes, and Fujimoto forces us to confront the things survivor's guilt never wants to accept. No matter how many times you rewrite the past in your head, you cannot change the destination. The guilt of surviving can paralyze a creator. It can make you feel like your passion is toxic, like the thing you love led to someone else's destruction. Look Back is about what you do when grief tries to take your purpose along with your person. If Chainsaw Man is shock and Look Back is guilt, then Goodbyeeri is the final most complex stage, the manipulation of memory. In Goodbyeeri, Yuta is asked by his dying mother and later his dying friend Eri to film their final days. But Yuta doesn't just record reality, he edits it. He cuts out his mother's difficult moments. He adds a fantasy explosion to her death scene because he can't face the raw, unedited ugliness of a hospital room ending. Fujimoto is asking one of the most uncomfortable questions in the entire trilogy here. When someone dies, do we actually miss them, or do we miss the curated, idolized version of them we manufactured in our heads? Throughout the entire story, Fujimoto blurs the line between documentary fiction and delusion. Eri dies, but Yuta keeps re-editing her movie for decades. He obsesses over her image until he's an old man. He is trapped in a loop of digital preservation, refusing to let the version of her he created on film age or change or disappear. And when the vampire version of Eri appears at the end, she gives Yuta and the audience the ultimate thesis of the entire story. Because of his movie, she can forget the pain of dying, and he can remember her with just a pinch of fantasy. It's a beautiful and terrifying coping mechanism. Fujimoto is exposing how human memory itself is an act of creative editing. editing. We alter our memories of the dead just so we can find the strength to survive their absence. We don't remember people exactly as they were. We remember the version of them that we needed them to be. So when you look across all 3 stories, a question emerges. Why does Fujimoto keep doing this? Why does he keep dragging his characters and his readers through the most painful experiences a human being can go through? I think the answer is actually in the titles. Chainsaw Man, Look Back, Goodbyeeri. Chainsaw Man is about what happens when death comes for you without warning and you have to keep moving anyway. Look Back is the act of turning around and confronting every choice that led to a loss. Goodbyeeri is the farewell, the moment you finally accept that the version of someone you've been holding on to exists now only in what you created together. 3 different relationships with death. 3 different stages, 1 unified argument. Grief is not a problem to be solved, it's a process to be lived through, and the only tool Fujimoto ever offers his characters to live through it is the same tool he uses to process it himself. Creation, art, the act of making something out of pain. That's the Grief Trilogy. 3 works, 3 stages. 1 man's obsessive, honest attempt to map out what it costs to love something in a world that takes everything away eventually. Which of these 3 stories hit you the hardest and why? Drop it below and subscribe for more videos like this.